Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, with a presentation looking at the Munich Beer Hall Putsch with a critical eye. This is a story of high drama, but it was also a story of high significance. So you will need to think about not just what happened, but what was significant about the putsch. And I'm talking about the putsch itself. What it shows is that history is never inevitable. Hitler was lucky not to be killed in the putsch. Even as things turned out, his political ambitions could have been buried. It was a fiasco, badly planned and badly executed. It was the trial that saved Hitler. So let's look at the reasons and the planning behind the putsch. And the first thing to note is that Hitler was actually pushed into it. In 1923, Hitler was under pressure from his own supporters to act. One of his SA commanders warned, "The day is coming when I won't be able to hold the men back. If nothing happens now, they'll run away from us." And they would have other right-wing nationalist parties to run to. So that part of Hitler's thinking was that even if the putsch failed, at least he and the Nazis would be seen as the leading force of right-wing nationalists. But the Nazis were still very much a minority party, with less than 3,000 members. True, Hitler had called for a new dictatorship, dismissing the whole idea of parliamentary government, and the final straw came when Stresemann called off the passive resistance. This was too much to bear. He had also been inspired by Mussolini and the manner in which he had seized power through the fascists' march on Rome. Hitler would later write in Mein Kampf how, at that time, 1922, I had a deep admiration for the man beyond the Alps, whose huge love for his people made him not bargain with Italy's enemies, but use all means to wipe them out. And even later, during World War II, Hitler would say, "Don't suppose that events in Italy had no influence on us. The March on Rome was one of the turning points of history. The mere fact that anything of the sort could be attempted and succeed gave us the push we needed." But Mussolini had been lucky. The so-called March on Rome was never what the myth had made it out to be, and only succeeded because the Italian king and his government panicked. And so to the Munich Putsch. It was a farce, badly organised and badly executed. 600 stormtroopers to seize control of the meeting of Gustav von Kahr, General von Lossow and Colonel von Seisser, the leading members of the Bavarian government. You know the story. Hitler stormed into the hall, waving a gun. One of the stormtroopers, on Hitler's order, fired a shot into the ceiling. The meeting was stopped, and Hitler announced the national revolution to everyone present. He then took Kahr and the other two into a side room at gunpoint. When Hitler returned to the meeting, he fired a shot into the ceiling himself in order to quieten the crowd, before telling them that Kahr and the others had agreed to join him in a new national government, and that would overthrow the federal government in Berlin. They hadn't, though. It was Erich Ludendorff who had been called in to help the putsch only whilst it was underway, and who was annoyed at being dragged into it, who actually persuaded the three leaders to join with it. But it was a huge bluff. Hitler's plans seemed to be working, but it soon began to unravel. Hitler was called away to deal with another urgent matter concerning the putsch, leaving Ludendorff to look after Kahr and the others. However, Ludendorff naively let them go, accepting their word that they needed to go in order to ensure the success of the putsch, something they had no intention of doing. By dawn, troops loyal to the government had surrounded the War Ministry, which Röhm, who had set up the SA in 1921, had seized for the Nazis, the only strategic target taken in the putsch. At this point, Ludendorff suggested an alternative plan. He and Hitler would march at the head of their supporters to the centre of the city and take it over. Ludendorff was convinced that no soldier, nor the police, who were mostly ex-soldiers, would fire on him. And so that is what they did. They got through the cordon of police guarding a bridge which they needed to cross, but when they met a second cordon of police near the War Ministry, the police stood firm. It's unclear which side fired the first shot, but shots were fired on both sides, and 16 Nazis and 3 policemen were killed, many more wounded. The marchers had been linked to each other, arm in arm. The man linked to Hitler's left was killed. Göring was badly wounded. Hitler dislocated his shoulder as he fell to the floor. The marchers fled, all except for Ludendorff, who stood his ground. Hitler was sped away to the country home of a close friend of his. It was from there that he was arrested 2 days later. Ludendorff was arrested on the spot. Göring was smuggled across the border into Austria. Röhm surrendered at the War Ministry. The putsch had quickly unravelled after Ludendorff's blunder releasing Kahr, Lossow and Seisser from the beer hall, where they were being held. They had never genuinely supported the putsch, but there were more fundamental factors behind its failure. Hitler was the leader of a very small extremist fringe party, and it showed. There was clearly little support for the putsch, even in the city where the Nazis were strongest, and the army in Munich remained loyal to the Weimar government. Hitler, under pressure, had miscalculated. So, there you have it. I hope it proves useful for you. As I said, all a bit of a farce, really. And you can make use of that if you are asked to describe the putsch in an A question. And this also helps in questions as to why Hitler attempted the putsch. This being the presentation, not the fact that it was a farce. Though I would add the other events of 1923. But the putsch was a disaster, only mitigated by the trial. Good luck with your studies, and thank you so much for listening. And don't forget my other stuff. There's my website, History Made Easier, and my ebooks. And you may be interested in tutorials. Just get in touch, or get your parents to get in touch at historymadeeasier@gmail.com. Oh, and there's also my podcast, Making Sense of This Crazy World, if you're really interested in history. But for now, cheers.